Oh, there you go. I see recording.
Yep,
Great.
there we go. Hi, everybody. I know a lot of you that I see on the call here. We met when we were in Cape Cod, so it's good to see you again. For anybody that we might not have met, I'm Kelly Gill. I'm the Senior Pollinator Conservation Specialist with the Xerces Society and also a partner biologist with NRCS. Joined here by Julie, who is a pollinator conservation planner and also a partner biologist working in the Connecticut River Valley. I cover the East region. And so our role is to provide technical assistance for exactly what we're doing today, creating pollinator habitat, conservation plans that include pollinator habitat, beneficial insect habitat, and more largely kind of a focus on, functional biodiversity and what that does for agriculture, conservation, and just the resilience of our landscape. So that's kind of our big arching umbrella. We have lots of other projects we could talk about, but today we want to focus on Putnam Farm. Julie, please advance. Thank you. I just clicked my computer. Control here. So today's meeting is going to be, the purpose for today is we're going to provide a high-level overview of the draft plan. We're not going to go through, page by page, line by line at this point, because that's boring. But certainly if people have very specific things that they would like addressed that we don't get to today, we're open to still getting that feedback, on a second call or email, however works for you. So we're going to go through kind of the practices that have been proposed. And for each of those sections, have time for review and discussion afterwards. And this format is, to keep things organized, not only, conceptually, so we're, focusing and not going on tangents, but also for Julie and I to be able to take notes in an organized manner so we can incorporate all your feedback and edits and then not miss anything. After we gather feedback from the group and address any additional follow-up, we'll revise the plan, incorporating that feedback and, reshare with the group again. Just so you know, this is also flexible if something happens when it comes time to, implement one of the plantings and there's maybe a plant species on the list that, you can't find or is in short supply, we can certainly come back and help there too. So we're not just going to leave you with this plan and walk away. Next. So far, just to recap what we've done, Julie and I work as partner biologists. So the request for assistance came partially through NRCS and RIC. NRCS provides both that technical assistance and financial assistance. Here we're just providing technical assistance. But you'll notice throughout the plan, the reason I bring this up is because the names of the practices or that we mention are NRCS practice names. So, things like wildlife habitat planting is pretty general. But this is because it will also count towards NRCS, the local office, as part of a larger conservation plan. So don't get hung up on those names. We could call it whatever we want, really. So that request came in winter. Over winter, Julie and I worked on doing some kind of, preliminary planning at our desks, creating maps, looking at site conditions, soils, ecological land descriptions, just to get an idea of, what we're getting into, what the space is like, and the conditions, and all of the wonderful features on the farm. In June, we came out and did some ground truthing, met with everybody, learned about different goals. We're able to do on-the-ground habitat assessments. And so taking what we learned from that mapping and actually seeing if it was what was going on there, and then getting that bigger, that whole in real life picture of the farm. So, and I want to point out here, the reason I put Julie's picture here is because she was really the one who did the bulk of this plan. I helped. And so kudos to Julie. Thank you so much. It was really fun to work on this with her. And here we are today. So that's the timeline. Next. Okay, so for this review and discussion today, if you were able to read the plan or just browse over it, we have kind of these 7 main opportunities. It's not limited to these. And, we're not suggesting that all of these things have to be implemented immediately. There's definitely prioritization in all of these plans. And so the hedgerows 1 and 2 seem to be a short-term priority. And we give recommendations for these other things that can be on your own timeline. So, taking this plan and chipping away at it as you see fit, and we can help with that as well. So, there's things here that we already know we would like to add in talking to Rick and some other folks. So it's a draft. We'll talk about each of these sections individually, and then we'll have some time for review, and we put the page numbers there in case anybody wanted to refer to the print plan document. Next. All right. Okay. Any questions about that? We're very flexible. This is an informal meeting. So, if you want to interject, please do. There's a little raise hand icon at the bottom of the screen as well. We just wanted to kind of make sure we really focus on this high level overview, solidify those big picture concepts, and then we can drill down to other details that might need to be changed or revised. So, thank you in advance, all of you, for bringing your knowledge and expertise to the table. It's so nice to be working with a big group of people who, are sharing common goals, and I really appreciate that. And I'm excited to hear what everybody has to say today. So at this point, if nobody has questions or any announcements, I'll turn it over to Julie. All right.
Okay, sounds good. Well, hi everyone. Like Kelly said, it's nice to see you all again. I'm going to be going through the recommendations piece by piece and stopping after each recommendation for input and discussion on it, just so we can sort of really focus on one recommendation at a time. But for a sort of broader picture first, when Kelly and I were designing the plan, we jotted down some of the conservation goals that we heard from you all to really try to implement that into each aspect of the plan. So just thinking about creating and enhancing habitat for pollinators and beneficial insects, obviously being a big priority by creating successive bloom periods, overwintering and nesting habitat, and management practices that promote pollinators, obviously being a big priority. Protecting existing habitat features. Putnam Farm has a lot of great pre-existing habitat. We were looking at some of the grasslands and scrubby areas that are really important for numerous wildlife like bird species. So protecting those existing features and managing those to promote their long-term sustainability. And then promoting climate resilience and regenerative practices. Fortunately, that kind of sounds like a really big task, but when you're working with native plants, there's really no better method of selecting a diverse range of native plants to sort of as an insurance policy. In the case of disturbance, one plant species doesn't do well in one year, you have another plant species that's hopefully able to provide the same sort of resource. Enhancing biodiversity and overall conservation value of the farm kind of goes hand in hand with those goals that we were talking about earlier. And then restoring and sustaining agricultural productivity. So taking sort of natural areas into the cropped areas to promote ecosystem services like pollination and pest control. And then, of course, last but not least, community engagement, a lot of different programs to keep your community and your members engaged in what you're doing on the property. So this is an overview of all the recommendations that are included in the plan. So I'll be going into these one by one for discussion. Just a general disclaimer. One thing that would be really valuable is that a lot of these you can use at different areas of the property. So if there's a piece of habitat that's missing from the map, we can talk about, what recommendation might be suitable for that area, or if we need to come up with different plant lists that may not be, well suited for the new proposal. But just something to think about and make sure to mention if you see anything that catches your eye. So starting off, like Kelly said, maybe one of the bigger priorities and definitely something that might be more feasible in the short term to get to work on sort of right away is pollinator hedgerow plantings and habitat strips. So this would look like establishing a diverse range of native flowering shrubs and wildflowers along the borders of the cropped area to really sort of create habitat within the cropped area and attract pollinators and beneficial insects into those areas to provide ecosystem services with those who farm on Putnam. So in our plan, we provide a plant list of both shrubs and herbaceous cover species, some installation guidance, and then layout and plant quantity. Hedgerow 1 and Hedgerow 2, of course, are already established on Putnam Farm, and Hedgerow 3 and Hedgerow 4 will be future hedgerows once those plots are established. So Hedgerow 1 and Hedgerow 2, our recommendations are really geared towards just improving them by incorporating a more diverse range of flowering species, sort of bulking it up a little bit to make it a bit more denser as well. And then Hedgerow 3 and Hedgerow 4, sort of starting from scratch, taking that plant list and really making as diverse of a planting as you can, because that diversity is really a key point to all of the stuff that we are promoting here. And of course, pollinator hedgerow plantings and habitat strips, especially in annually cropped areas, are really important for establishing permanent habitat for wildlife like pollinators and beneficial insects. It provides pollen and nectar forage throughout the year if you're selecting a diverse range of species that cover a successive bloom period, and is sort of keeping a resident population of those target wildlife species near the cropped areas. It's also a multifunctional space, so providing nesting and overwintering habitat, and also operating as a dispersal corridor, connecting these habitat patches throughout the landscape. But that's a general overview of this first recommendation. And so, yeah, this recommendation starts on page 9. Hopefully you all have access to the plan. If anybody has any questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, yeah, I'd like to open up for a discussion. Hi, John.
Hi, Kelly and Julie. Thanks so much. It was it's a very high level draft. So I just have an easy question here, I guess, as we pause for the new hedgerows. Your draft speaks to me on how to, I guess, create this layering, but as the new hedgerows are going to start kind of from a very bare, I guess, start, are you recommending like sowing seed mix and planting amongst them? I think is, and so you have recommendations on the herbaceous cover for the hedgerows, and that is the general recommendation. And so I'm following along with these wonderful techniques about, I guess, mechanical or this mowing regime that I'm really studying up on here. And I think you call it low till, or I really want to buy a disc after reading this report. Someone's tractor. But so, are you recommending sowing the seed and planting amongst them in like the new hedgerows? And we have a lot of blue stem in that area. If they were left undisturbed, we'd probably roll with that ground cover. But do you feel like it's a good idea to kind of turn that over, or whether it's a disking or harrowing, chain harrow? Should we turn that over and try to get some diversity in there from day one? I guess it's just my question.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, yeah, it's sort of a teeter-totter of weighing, what you're taking away versus what you're adding. And especially little blue stem, I think for the hedgerows is maybe in that mix as well. So you'd kind of be taking away from that and then adding it right back. But yeah, the appeal of that is definitely for those new hedgerows, starting with a clean slate so you can create those really diverse areas. And without, adequate site preparation, it might be difficult to establish, all of those species in a really functional way. I don't know if Kelly has any additional thoughts about that.
Yeah, definitely. So there's, practices here that have two different types of planting methods for a seeding, a wildflower seeding, or a meadow or grassland, whatever you want to refer to it as. If you were doing that, yes, really, really, really good site prep is critical, because The seeds need to hit soil. They take longer to grow. When they're tiny seedlings amongst weeds, it's hard to, discern which is good, which is the desirable plant and which is the weed. So, those areas can get, outcompeted in that first year. Planting transplants, we have a little bit more flexibility. We can leave, patches of little blue stem along a hedgerow. But we do want to make sure that we are clearing out any kind of competing vegetation. So any new plants, really can flourish. I didn't notice in the hedgerow areas any huge, invasive weed problems. But in other parts of the farm, where there's, introduced grasses, maybe some more invasive species, that would be, more of a consideration. So yes, we want to start with a clean slate, but we want to also kind of consider what's there, which is what Julie just said too. So really we have some flexibility, John, and we can work that out however you think is best.
Well, thank you. I guess in large part, once we start over there, I think that's our next work effort, our next approved phase. In large part, I guess it'll depend on what natives exist in like hedgerow 3 and 4 and what we're working around for, parent material, I suppose. But we'd love to circle back with you and kind of go over that stuff when the time is right.
And whenever we do, mechanical site prep, we want to make sure we're reducing disturbance as much as possible. So we're going shallow. We're not trying to bring up dormant weed seeds, from 4 feet under the soil that are going to, germinate once they hit the sun. We don't know what's under there. We want it to stay under there. So we're talking very minimal, shallow, kind of soil working for that. But yes, we can certainly follow up on that. I will make a note of it.
Thank you.
Julie, Kelly, I'll throw up a follow-up question to that. As you know, when we created the first 2 hedgerows, we repurposed, transplanted a lot of existing material just because it made sense to do so. As we start from scratch with hedgerows number 3 and 4, to what degree does it make sense to make use of what's there and to transplant? We're going to clear for those plots. There's going to be transplanting opportunities again. But then that does involve putting a lot of the same stuff back on the property as opposed to introducing diversity. What are your thoughts about introducing more diversity versus repurposing what's there?
Right. Yeah. So our intention with the plan was the latter, is to increase diversity, and a lot of those species that are out there are definitely providing, numerous benefits to wildlife. But you're really going to get a lot more sort of value out of the property by increasing the plant diversity that's out there. So I definitely think that transplants are a really great and economical way, and it's also, appealing to the plants that are already there. I think that's great. So I think there's definitely, a lot of flexibility in the plan to do both in certain cases. Yeah.
And then a little bit of a follow-up thought to that is there are the 2 hedgerows number 3 and 4, adjacent to the plots. And then there's the trail hedgerow towards the back between the trail and plots 19 and 20, where transplanting some of the larger transplants and the head start that would provide towards a taller, denser screen might make sense. So I throw that out to you as well. It's just a function of trying to figure out where we would best use our transplanted material when we clear for plots numbers 13 through 20.
Yeah. And Kelly, maybe you have better insight into this. My concern with that would potentially be, the establishment of what we're planting around that. If it would just, not give them the chance to access sun, when you have everything sort of starting off smaller, you're having they're more able to access sun and fill in those spaces. I'm just kind of curious if, there would be any concern about establishing those shadier areas and not letting that, sort of understory develop. That's just a thought, though. I'm not sure if that's a reasonable concern. Druzy, is that not Gail, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, the only thing about that, and I understand about the sunlight and establishing things that are small, but in that one particular area, we need to pay attention to shielding the recreational walkers,
Right.
from the plots at sometimes. We want to make sure they still sort of have a kind of a wooded experience as they enjoy the property. So that's one of the reasons to
Right.
consider that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Kelly, do you have any additional thoughts on that?
No, we certainly can be flexible with that. With some strategic maybe spacing of those transplants, allowing some areas where we do get some sun infiltrating down.
Yeah.
And we're here to work with you. And so, if that's something that you want to do, if you feel that it's a good resource and you have it already and it's, makes sense, we can certainly, work with that as well. We're not, we're here to help and meet you where you are, I guess is what I'm saying. So certainly.
Yeah, and I wonder, we could also maybe provide some shade loving plant recommendations if that is of interest for you all to do. I think that would be a nice way to gain that cover as well, and maybe just change the plant list a little bit. John?
I just think, and listening to everyone, I think we're going to be all right. You guys, I just found that you have your north arrow on your plan, so you can see our orientation. And Ag Council, I know, gave thought to we're talking about phase 4 at this point, where on the phase 4 layout, the 8-plot layout, should the hedgerows go? And it was kind of conceived where you have it mapped, areas 3 and 4, so they wouldn't provide shade to the field. So in east-west, you're gonna have sun. They'll be able to do what the commission wants in terms of the privacy screen for the trail. You're gonna be able to do maybe like in this photo that shows a very diverse mix in those areas. We're gonna have good light there, just the way the sun comes up and over that site.
Okay. Great. Okay, are there any other questions or comments on this recommendation? And also, if something comes up later, we can kind of do a, oh, I forgot to say it, and do that at the end if something comes up. Okay, so transitioning to the next recommendation, once again, a hedgerow. We kind of have talked about this one a little bit. Windbreak planting in this one location right along the trail, hopefully to be a multifunction. Kelly, did you? All okay? Okay. Be a multifunctional purpose of a privacy screen, potentially buffering some of the wind, and creating that forested area along the trail for those who are using the trail. So for this, the big distinction for this one was selecting, greater range of taller statured trees and shorter statured shrubs and herbaceous cover to really make a sort of dense layer that provides all of these roles. So once again, we provide a plant list on page 19, some installation guidance also on page 12 from the previous recommendation, and layout and plant quantity. So like I mentioned, this is going to serve a lot of benefits for abiotic factors as a wind buffer and privacy screen, but this too will also be a dispersal corridor and provide numerous resources for pollen and pollinators and other target wildlife groups. The plant list that we developed also includes a lot of really important caterpillar host plants, as well as fruit and nut producing trees for other wildlife species. So any questions or further comments on this recommendation? John.
I'm just going to keep talking. I really like this slide. You know, I'm staring at it, but you know, you have some, I guess, I don't know, almost looks like oak leaf and some woody stuff in there. But this is an area I think that Commission Chair just spoke about where we're going to need privacy, and we have larger transplants, to Rick's point. But this slide, is this a situation where, you know, like a strip is created and, you know, seed is sown? I mean, it really, I've never tried this, but this looks very purposefully created, and it's something that we could probably do over in that area, assuming this strip is, you know, 5 to 10 or 12 feet wide.
Right. I think that's an important consideration to this is how wide, you know, we're willing to go for this strip. Kelly, do you have any context for this photo?
Yes, I do. When we have, you know, a hard edge of tall canopy trees and we want to kind of soften that and create a transitional zone, you know, just to make more habitat niches, have better, more diverse plant structure. You know, people think about birds a lot, you know, ground, mid-story birds, canopy birds. Same for pollinators, and, you know, these plants, we could include more plants that bloom at different times. This can be done very purposefully with transplants, you know, including, you know, both shrubs and herbaceous plants. Seeding is, you know, a little bit more difficult and would be more leaning toward an herbaceous plant community. So, you know, it can be either or, really. We just want to see, you know, I think we want to pick for seeding, we want to pick the areas that will be easiest to seed, just because it's a more arduous process. And if we have more difficult areas, I would recommend them being planted into with plugs, or areas where you want something to, you know, establish more quickly. For instance, you know, the parking lot area, if you don't want to, you know, remove all that vegetation and till it and make it bare soil, we can think of ways to do some transplanting in there, so you get that, you know, aesthetic value quicker. But for any of these practices, you know, we could flip-flop back and forth from seeding to transplanting. But just, you know, being aware of the differences in the amount of effort it takes to get things established by seed, and that timeline is a little bit longer. So we say, like, the first year it sleeps, the second year it creeps, the third year it leaps. So you don't see a whole lot, or at least the whole diversity of a mix, you know, the first 2 years.
Yeah, and to add on that, especially being along the trail, using, you know, plugs or something along those lines, it would be much more evident of, you know, what you're intending to do. Along that planting, while a seeding may have some people perplexed for a little bit longer, or maybe even, you know, if they're having their dogs, may not know to, you know, keep them from trampling that area while the seedlings develop. So, yeah.
Good point regarding our canine visitors.
I think a lot about them. I've battled a lot of dogs in my conservation day, so. Any additional questions on this recommendation?
I love that slide also. I love that tiered effect, and I hope we can find relevant areas to execute that sort of a vision.
Yeah.
It's really where you can get more bang for your buck, adding on to existing habitat, diversifying, and this is one of my favorite things, because it's an easy concept, and I just, you know, I really like that, increasing that structural diversity as well.
Yeah, so you have to create it so we can use your site as a demonstration in our slide next time.
Sign us up.
Okay, well, if there's not any other comments, I'm gonna go to the next recommendation. Okay, so this was briefly mentioned in our site visit, but something that we wanted to include in case it ever becomes a priority in the future, the riparian forest buffer plans for pollinators. So this will be, right adjacent to the salt marsh. So a lot of thought went into the plant recommendations for this, hopefully really trying to match what we would typically see in this sort of area, especially along Cape Cod. I know there's a little outlook there that people can go and observe the salt marsh as well. So may provide sort of an additional community engagement opportunity. But this will look like native flowering plants of herbaceous cover, shrubs, trees for pollinators in this riparian zone. So we provide a plant list and some installation guidance once again for this. And of course, so this is really critical transitional zone that not only provides numerous abiotic benefits of bank stabilization and flooding prevention, but it's really key to sort of supporting these aquatic and terrestrial habitats and sort of feeding into both, acting as an area for both wildlife species to use. The species that we selected are of course going to provide a continuous pollen and nectar forage throughout the season and nesting and overwintering sites. And especially for this one, we were thinking about supporting our bird species with things like grasses, sedges, rushes, and things that produce fruits and nuts. So that's a quick overview of this. Any questions or comments? Rick.
Another observation, that's one of the reasons that's another great area to focus on is that that overlooks the Jeremiah's Gutter. It's a historical marker at one point in time that hopefully that area will become a nice destination on the property.
Yeah.
So, helping it evolve into what it could be from a planting perspective would be awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Julie, I'd like to chime in here.
Yes, please.
It's Dick Hilmer. I just want to say this is a really wonderful piece of work you've done. It lays everything out for us, and it lays it out in just a logical way. I'd also just like to say about the riparian buffer that to me, this is one of the high priorities. It's a critical ecosystem. It's so diverse. It's almost the hot spot of diversity, so that if we're looking for that species richness and abundance, this is the place that the critical nature of the Pine Barrens. I mean, we have to go back to, I think we're, again, Pine Barren ecosystems is being understated in this draft. This is just a remarkable, there are 3 major sections of ecosystem and the repair of it, let's use that word, that's just going to help all species that are migrating through, swimming through, needing to nest, and so this is why, to me, it's just this is a high point of the riparian forest buffer, is a high point for our work.
Oh, great. That's really great to hear. Yeah. Transitional zones are really critical areas of habitat. So I think this would be a wonderful opportunity, not only for wildlife, but for really engaging the community in what you're doing on Putnam Farm to help the environment. So.
Yeah, wonderful job. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions, concerns? Okie doke. So moving on to the next recommendation, sort of entering more so around where the wetlands are going to be. Starting off upland though. So upland buffer plants for pollinators. So this is one, the seed mix that we designed is going to be, pretty applicable to a lot of different areas in the surrounding area, such as the area between the parking lot and future plots 13 and 14. They're going to, once established, be able to tolerate drought and really serve as a nice, what we think of with pollinator habitat. Generally, people think of like wildflower meadows. That's what you're going to get when with this recommendation in the plan. So really focusing on a really diverse range of native wildflowers and grasses to support species inhabiting that area. So we provide a plant list, a seed mix as well. For this area, we are recommending seeding, so we provide some additional guidance on what that process may look like. As Kelly mentioned, it's a much more intensive process and will require very thorough site preparation. So really a critical part of this will be that seeding guidance. And of course, we have this nice depiction of what it could look like in the future. Really supporting pollinators through pollen and nectar forage and nesting and overwintering sites. And then of course, for other wildlife, seed production. And really critical to this is that successive bloom period, which is covered in this plant list, which I figured I'd throw in just to demonstrate the amount of diversity and bloom periods that you're really covering in just this planting alone, where you really have quality nectar and pollen resource for wildlife throughout the entire growing season. So yes, any comments and questions? John.
I really like this part. This slide, boy, the beekeeper will really love this. And so on page 29 this is your bloom chart for the page 29 mix. I just I hadn't had the time to compare page 29 to some of the commercially available mixes, but I don't know if you're ever buying these. Obviously, the ones that they kind of have ready are much cheaper than like giving them page 29 and having to make a mix for you. If I did a little further work, would you be available just to kind of compare this to the commercially available stuff to see where the gaps are?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
That's definitely something.
All right, thanks. I might take you up on that.
Yeah, there's a couple of things to, really consider when we're talking about the available mixes. Those are, our mixes, we formulate them to be in pure live seed. The mixes that you see sold off the shelf are bulk mix, which means they have, still have debris and chaff and seed that's not going to germinate and, other material in there from harvesting. And so the weight of that bag is not just the seed. And so if you look at the recommendations, we may say, oh, this mix is, more expensive by pure live seed, but you only have to seed, 9 pounds, 8 pounds per acre. Whereas if you go on Earth's website and look at a bulk mix, it's cheaper per pound, but the recommendation is to seed 20 pounds. So we can certainly help you with that. There are some good ones out there, and I do this all the time. It's a puzzle because all the seed companies also, they develop quotes and mixes differently. So they could be using different numbers in different ways, and it can get really confusing. So this was something I was going to bring up anyway. Yeah, we could totally, and I think it's critical. If you do all the work and you get to the seed mix purchasing point, you don't want to screw up there, right? So certainly, that's one of the more complicated things to deal with, and we're here to help. And we work with the seed companies. Know us. We work with them all the time.
Thank you. And I mean, I didn't even realize you're a vendor of the stuff. So I mean,
no, we're not a vendor, but we have worked with companies that want to, help, like have a Xerces approved mix. And sometimes that's good and sometimes it's bad. We don't want to just blanket the whole world with the same mix. And a particular pre-made mix isn't going to be good for every site, right? So It's like, give and take.
We buy a little bit of this, but not a lot, and so it kind of allows me to keep going to the same vendor. But do you work with Ernst out of Pennsylvania? I think I asked you.
Oh yes, all
Okay.
the time. Yep.
So their catalog is on my desk, and that's what I hadn't compared to page 29 yet. But I know, yeah, there you go, Kelly. And if you go to Ernst and just give them this, they'll make you this, but it's usually more expensive. But I didn't. I will definitely follow up on this. These areas, it was a really good, and for the commissioners, when they get to see this, these areas were part of a previous report we got from Tom Biebinghauser, and you really drill down on how to prepare them and then how to manage them, through this 3-year. I just wrote down your acronym. What'd you say? Sleep, creep. What was it?
Sleep.
I wrote that down. All right. So yes. So these are areas now that these pages are great for me, and I think the commission, once they see them on not only the site prep, but then the management for the first 3 years, and also management, you're given mow heights, mow times, just really good stuff. I did really appreciate reading this and the kind of detail you provided. So Julie, Kelly, thank you very much.
Of course. Yeah. Rick.
So follow up to that, looking at this, just so I'm clear, this slide that you have here with all these different seeds recommended, is this a seed mix that Xerces would be able to get for us?
So you would have to purchase it. There might be some opportunity. I could check with, sometimes Ernst.
And I didn't, to be clear, I didn't mean get for free, but basically you can access this seed mix.
What we do is, and what I recommend doing and what I could help you do, we tell people to do this on their own when they're working with NRCS, because we can't really advocate for one vendor over another. But we give them a list. And, certainly what I would do here is, work with you, John, whoever, send this mix directly to Ernst, Pineland Seed, a couple of places, ask them for a quote, get those quotes back, review them. Inevitably, there'll be some substitutions, seed inventory isn't consistent every year. We'll look at those, see if they're okay, and go back and forth with whatever seed company until we have, a mix that we like, the species that we like, they're all there at the right amounts, and then put the order in.
And then, and I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but I know that Xerces is going to potentially provide us with some planting material, potentially. Is seed something that Xerces sometimes provide us with, or do you focus on plant material?
So we could talk about either one. We've been more recently, the last couple of years, focusing on live plants because of we have a habitat kit program, and a lot of those kits are going to, more gardens, community plantings, areas where people don't really have equipment or expertise to do an entire seeding, and they're typically smaller areas. So, for ease of establishment, we've been giving them live plants. You get that instant satisfaction. But we have worked with different projects. We might have funding for seed, or if you preferred the seed over the live plants, we could just funnel that funding into getting seed. So, we could also do a price comparison and see what would be more, economical that way as well for you.
Got it. Okay, just curious.
Yeah. And then, thinking about, we could add plants to this as well. So it's not, it's not the end of the road here. if there's, and I know Betsy and we got some other recommendations for species that maybe we may have overlooked that would do really well on the site, we could go and put those in. So yeah, totally flexible on this.
Yeah, and one thing that I was really kind of joyful to hear about is that you are doing, local seed collection of native wildflowers. And I know we talked about wild lupin as being one potential, and I think that would be great to include in these areas. We didn't put those in because we figured that, you might be incorporating that in yourselves with that local seed collection. But if you think it would be a good idea just to make mention of that in the plan somewhere, or include it in these mixes, some of those species, we could definitely do that as well. Okay. Any additional comments, questions? Okay. So next recommendation, wetland plants for pollinators. Kelly and I had the chance to look at the wetland restoration project proposal. We were excited to see that there was a good amount of overlap with that, especially on some of the species that we were recommending. So this would look like just flowering wetland plants for pollinators in these areas, which is quite flexible in the plan as well. So providing a plant list, and we separated it into a transitional zone and a bank and overbank zone. So that bank and overbank zone is going to be a recommendation of species that will have somewhat more consistently, wetter feet than that transitional zone. Once those species establish, hopefully they'll be able to tolerate the drier summer periods if the water retreats. So that was the idea in that. We also provide some insight into live staking, which we think could be a really great thing to include in this, a really affordable way to get a lot of plants and establish them pretty quickly. And you'll see on the plant list, we have a little asterisk to mark which plants will be suitable for live staking. We don't provide any recommendations on implementation. I think, you have a lot of wetland experts, so I think they'll be best for, actually establishing the plants once the restoration is complete. I think the one really important thing to consider, especially between the two different plant lists, is making sure there's areas that you're establishing those plants sort of overlapping to accommodate those moisture differences. There's not going to be a sharp line necessarily. So really having some overlapping if you're doing the seeding within those areas, I think would be pretty important to consider. And of course, wetlands, I think, are a really underappreciated part of pollinator conservation, especially in New England. Our wetlands are really critical areas of habitat and provide really important areas for pollinators, which I don't think most people think of. But a lot of these plants, things like boneset, Joe Pye weed, ironweed, are just these like pollinator favorite plants that support a lot of specialist species as well, and can be a larval host plant as well. Nesting and overwintering sites, nesting sites, especially for other target wildlife species, especially with the including certain grass species within those mixes. And then, of course, the abiotic benefits of water infiltration, carbon sequestration, and flood mitigation that you're getting as an added bonus of installing these native, deep-rooted perennial plants within this area. Any questions or comments on this recommendation? Rick.
For the novices here, can you just clarify where bank begins and overbank ends and vice versa?
Yeah, I don't know if I could demonstrate it on the map. That would be something that I would imagine the hydrologists would help you delineate when you're doing the wetland restoration. But the bank and overbank zone is going to be, within that line of the water, just going up and like right adjacent to it. So in the fluctuating water levels, those plants could actually be, somewhat submerged, some part of them submerged in that zone. While the transitional zone, it will have wet feet, but there's much less, exposure to that level of submersion.
Is the overbank zone the variable area, and the bank is more consistently wet?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of variability. It's like it's a gradient, so
Got it.
I think that's what's important about if you're seeding, sort of overlapping those, even from the upland buffer, maybe at some points, like the upland buffer to the transitional zone, to the overbank zone, to the bank zone, making sure, that there's overlap there. So those little differences in conditions can sort of, the species that will do well there will establish there.
Got it.
John.
I just follow up to that. So I think we have kind of two distinct transitional zones in the proposed wetland restoration area. So you have kind of upland going into wet meadow, and then you have wet meadow going into something wetter, like a vernal pond or a pond.
Right.
And so it's a good point. We will definitely carry forward the recommendation to overlap those distinct zones.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments, questions? And like I said previously, the maps are, our tentative understanding of where this might be and where you're doing the wetland restoration. But definitely if you need us to update the boundaries or anything like that, just to have a bit clearer for people who are getting introduced to the plan for the first time, let us know, and we can work on some more accurate boundaries. Okay, getting down to the last couple of recommendations. So management practices for pollinators. We've talked a little bit about them already. Protect and manage existing habitat. The photo at the top is from Putnam Farm, our site visit. Preserving certain areas. This was one of the areas that was pointed out as an area that, you can just leave, and it provides, quality habitat for a lot of different wildlife species. We also like to see those, nice exposed patches of bare sandy soil. It's great for a lot of ground nesting bees and whatnot. So invasive species management, of course, seems like really top of the priority. Managing species like bittersweet and multiflora rose and honeysuckle, of course. Once you remove those invasive species, give opportunities and to establish a diverse range of native species, that's really going to go a long way of improving the conditions on the site. For pollinator habitat like meadows, mowing in the fall, ideally, sometime in October, and doing a rotational patch mow, maybe doing 1/3 of the habitat one year and then rotating that little patch so you're never mowing the same patch consistently, and keeping it at a high height so you're really allowing those plants to establish their root systems and not leaving just a little nubble that will kind of exhaust those resources over time. Any questions about this? Okay. And lastly, community outreach. I think that there's really so many opportunities that you all could pursue. Bee City USA, with the amount of enthusiasm for pollinators that we heard when we were there, might be a good program to look at. There's information on the application process included in the plan. If that is of interest, you get a nice little sign to put up in your town so people can recognize you. And then community science programs, 2 Xerces supported community science programs are Bumblebee Watch and Firefly Atlas, which we also link for additional resources if there's interest in that. Plant pollinator surveys are really a great way to get the community engaged in thinking about pollinators, so they see the value in the work that you're doing. Getting them out there, observing the species that are out there are not only, great for that engagement, but good for you to get the context of, what species you're supporting. Or, sometimes you can always find, species that may really surprise you. That's always keeps me outside looking for bees, because I'm always excited to find something new. But yeah, so we have multiple tools that will help you in those monitoring efforts that are included in the plan. And then, of course, opportunities for expanding habitat and outreach with initiatives like the Cape Cod Pollinator Pathway and other local initiatives. Kelly.
I also just want to add, this is a really amazing site. It has so much going on and so many really kind of cool, habitats and ecotones. And so another thing that to consider is, working for NRCS and training, having to train people all the time, which is a big part of my job. Is like people are looking for sites like this, where they can do a training and talk about all these different types of habitats and management, or the animals that use them, or whatever it may be. And this is kind of like, these are the dream locations we're always looking for. And a lot of times we find ourselves like saying, like, pretend you're here, or pretend you're in this type of environment. And here you could really reach that. So I could see this being, valuable, for adult education, youth, activities and things like that as well. I don't know if that's a goal, but something to keep in mind, as you have, people farming there, interested community members, interested people that are just naturalists that want to come out and kind of observe animals and all these great different habitat features. It's really kind of amazing that you have this. It's a gem for sure.
Thank you for helping us optimize it.
Yes, a pleasure. Okay, well, if there's no other questions on this recommendation, that's all we had prepared. We can talk about everything overall, if that's useful, maybe answer general questions. But I just want to say thank you all for your time and all your enthusiasm and the warm welcome that we received when we came out to the site. It was a really wonderful time, and definitely a highlight of my year. So I really appreciate everyone's time and everyone's enthusiasm. So.
Do you say that to everybody?
I do not. You have to save it for special occasions. So
I just want to thank you both from Town Hall, Kelly and Julie, and thank you, Rick, for reaching out to Xerces and putting this together. For this just to fall into the Conservation Department with very little effort from my end. I know I've been standing on the sidelines, but this is an incredibly valuable plan. And really, if the commission goes forward with the projects that are being discussed out there, the level of detail you provided us with us in the draft, and I'll see the final version here, is exceptional. And it goes right into practice. And so with very little thought, you can really just take what you've described and implement it. And so I look forward to having the opportunity to do that. We'll see how it goes. But I can't thank you enough for the report. Very, very detailed. It really reads to me. It did on some of the specific maintenance practices and the installs. So wonderful job. I can't thank you enough.
thank you so much.
This is Drucy, just to jump on that. From the Conservation Commission's perspective, this is great information to have. It's great to see all the integration of habitat and transitional zones and wildlife corridor discussion included in this, because that of course is really important for conservation practices and also for this property that we manage. It's a very unique property, as you know, in terms of the agriculture going on there, and to get it all mixed together with the wildlife and the agriculture and the wetlands. It's a great combination of stuff. So thank you again for all your hard work.
Thank you, everybody, for your valuable input. That feedback does mean a lot to me. People who know the site, like John and all the folks on the call here, more intimately, of course, can help us, give you the proper guidance and steer that ship. So it's great. I'm so happy that, you like it and you're interested in doing all this stuff, and it really motivates us to be, proud of our work. So that's a very nice compliment. Thank you, everybody. I guess I went over next steps a little. Oh, Rick, sorry.
Sorry, go ahead. Finish. What were you going to say, Kelly?
No, you go first.
Well, I just wanted, if you're going to, talk about next steps, by no means are we exclusively relying on Xerces, but by the same token, to the degree that you can speak to what sort of plant materials may be available to the town and what is expected from us in return for receiving them, I think it would be helpful for us to understand.
Yeah, I think now that we kind of have, these core practices outlined, and we could talk about what the easiest way to go about this is. Are there certain plants that are hard to find for you that maybe we could help with? Do you want some of, an assortment of plants that are just going to be adaptable to a variety of situations? I'm thinking about the 4 hedgerows, plants that you could kind of plug in and supplement the existing ones and then eventually the new ones. So we can talk about that more. And now that we have good measurements and kind of confirmation on the, practices we've outlined, we could think about the number of plants, the spacing, all that kind of stuff, those details that we just didn't have all the info yet for.
Got it.
Yep. So there's going to be follow-up on that for sure. Well, I guess if anybody thinks of anything else, or, I know not everybody loves talking in front of a group, so feel welcome to reach out to me anytime with questions or concerns or ideas, whatever you want to share, complaints, send them to Julie. And, we're happy to continue to work together. These plans are dynamic. So once things get moving and, you start phase 4, you might realize, oh, we need to change this a little bit. That's not a problem. We're here to help throughout the process. So anything else you want to talk about, or is everybody kind of ready to wind down their day?
Kelly, I know you recorded this. Are you planning to distribute a link so that we can get it to folks who missed it and wanted to participate?
Yes. You may automatically receive one through the calendar invite, but I'm not quite sure how that works outside of Xerces. So once it downloads, it takes a little while to process afterwards. I will send that out to you. There's a whole group, and you could share it however you'd like. And there's, I believe, a transcript that will come with it, so we could all remember the promises we made.
Yeah.
Thanks again. It's been a real pleasure.
Kelly and Julie, I just want to say thank you very much. This is an awesome document, gets us all running, so that lots of notes were taken. It's going to be fun. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I typed up a page and a half. So
we forgot about the Diamondback terrapin, so I just have to throw that in.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Well, thank you, everybody, for your time today. It's great to get this input. We often hand over a plan and never hear anything about it. It just goes into implementation. So it's fun to hear actual feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Come back with your shovel.
All right. Thank you, Julie, for doing all the work.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.